Good evening, everybody. Good evening. Hi, Noelle. It's nice to see you.
Hi, you too.
Hi, everybody. We're going to wait a couple minutes. We assume we'll have a few more join now, and then we assume some of our registrants will trickle in a little after we've started. Folks who are, getting dinner on the table and finishing up folding laundry and stuff. But we'll give it a couple minutes to let some more folks join us. Thank you for being here, everybody. There we go. I realize most folks are probably also in the middle of something. There's laundry being folded or homework being helped with. If you are able to come off um, and onto video at any point during the night, we do love to see your faces, even if it's just to see you for a moment before you disappear. I know that's not always possible where folks are at the time, but if you're able to, thank you. Thank you. That's great. Thanks, Nicholas. That's exactly what I'm talking about. A little wave. And then we do these virtually so that we can be a part of community and join in, and also life keeps going and we can keep doing life. So we do understand the multitasking, but it's great to see your face. Thank you for doing that. All right, I'm going to guess that we're going to have some folks trickle in, and Amanda, who's right there in the corner, will let those folks in. But I'm going to get started with us because you're all here incredibly on time. And I know you have busy evenings ahead. We want to honor that. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you all. Thank you. Thank you, Lynn. It's nice to see your face. My name's Jackie Davis. I'm the Education Director at Marin Healthy Youth Partnerships. We are an organization based right here in Marin County, and we're all about promoting healthy environments to support youth well-being, and in particular to reduce substance use. So when we talk about healthy environments, we mean healthy schools, healthy homes, healthy communities, even healthy online environments, which we see more and more intersecting with some of that substance use risk. So we're really just all about supporting schools, supporting you all. Um, we're all trying to do the best we can by our kids, and we like being a part of that process. The hope tonight is that we're going to share some knowledge and tools with you that help you feel a little more confident in supporting your kids in navigating a tricky landscape. And we're going to do that in a unique way tonight. So, we are going to talk about substance use risk. We are going to talk about all of the research on parenting for prevention, but we're really going to layer in the research on what we know also about high achieving teens, and where that dovetails with risk, where it dovetails with protection, and how we can set our kids up for those healthy and safe decisions, and overall well-being in high school, and then also in college. Can I see maybe just in the chat? It'd be great to know what grade or what grades your kids are in. So if you want to go ahead and turn to the chat, let me know the grades. That also gives me an idea, who's in ninth grade and really looking at high school prevention. Which of you have seniors and you're really looking at heading off to college, that independence next year? Thanks to those of you who are starting to enter in the chat. Keep that going so I can see. Great. Great. We have a span. That's terrific. A lot of you seem to have two teenagers in high school at the same time. Good on you. Um, this will be terrific. Okay. So a few notes that might seem obvious, but they really bear mentioning. The first is that parenting is hard. We always assume anyone in our room is here doing the best they can. No judgment on ourselves or others for what we've done, what we've not done. We're very much all in this together. Um, our kids are awesome. Kids who are doing great, the kids who are struggling, they're all awesome. That's why we're here. And I want to really lay that foundation of us knowing that substance use is not bad behavior. It's not bad kid behavior. It's not bad parenting behavior. It's a really complex public health issue, but with zero moral judgment on it. We can be the best of families, the best of kids, and still really struggle with this health issue, right? I'm going to use the term high achieving tonight. That might feel like it matches, that might feel weird. It's the term that's used a lot in the research body or by clinicians who do the work. You might recognize your kid in some of the descriptions, other things you might not recognize, and that's okay. We need you and your participation to ground us in your unique kids and unique families and your unique school so we can balance the research on high achieving teens with that reality of who you all are. Okay. We're all here for different reasons. So take what works for you and leave what doesn't. Um, I want to hear again from you all. If you could choose a word right now to describe, or a couple words, I'll let you have, to describe being a parent of a teen right now, what would they be? You can do that in the chat as well. If you could describe being a parent of a teen, yes, it is exhausting. Wonderfully stressful. I love the combination of the two. Busy. Yeah, we're going to talk about that. Bewildering. Absolutely. Tricky. I used the word tricky to describe it earlier today, actually. Yeah, absolutely. Exciting, overwhelming. Yeah, all of these things. Yeah, yeah. There was a combination. I think Mark was this was you. Wonderfully stressful, which for me, those two words are actually perfect because there is all the like joy and excitement and reward of it, but also it is so stressful and so exhausting. Somebody said bewildering, which I think is a great term for it as well. Um, and there is no roadmap. There is no blueprint for how to do this parenting thing, particularly when we get to the teen years. When they're little and they're not sleeping, there's sleep guidance. You talk to your neighbors and your friends about what your kids are eating when they're starting to eat at 6 months old, right? And as they get older, the problems become more challenging, less clear answers and harder to talk about, right? And more stigmatized to talk about. And there's not as much guidance. And so bewildering is really a great word for it. So hopefully there's no silver bullet. I don't have that for you tonight, but we do have a lot of good research. We have a lot of caring parents and a lot of really cool kids. And hopefully when we leverage those three things, we get some positive outcomes. We'll talk about what prevention is and why it's important. We'll talk about what we're actually seeing in Marin and at Branson. We're going to look at teen risk generally, but also teen risk specifically for this high achieving teen group. Some parenting tools for prevention, and then we're going to learn what our kids are learning, which is about fentanyl and emergency response. And then at the end of the night, we are going to hear specifically from Noelle. If you could give a wave, Noelle. We're so excited and so lucky to have Noelle with us. She's a human development teacher at Branson. She'll be participating throughout, but also really here to talk about what your kids are learning and what the resources are for them. And when you know what's going on with them in the classroom, if they're not the type who come home and share, that's a really good opportunity for you to be able to initiate a conversation, knowing that they know. Okay, so prevention. Um, when we talk about prevention, we're really talking about a pretty intentional process of reducing risk factors, which we all have for substance use, and strengthening protective factors, strengthening resilience, so that we change the balance of risk factors and protective factors. Protective factors win out, and we can either stop use before it starts, delay initiation of use, or reduce harm, right, for use that's already started. Beyond that, every family is going to define prevention with their own goals, right? For some, that's going to be, you know what? No use. No use is what's going to work in our home. And for others, especially if you seen it all started. You might decide to reduce, you might decide you're just about reducing harm at that point. But know that regardless of your individual family goals, it's really about increasing our protective factors and decreasing our risk factors, right? We know that prevention matters. We know this more now than we ever did. So, um, you all might have grown up or still have in your thoughts these ideas that adolescent use is a rite of passage or it's inevitable or kids will be kids, right? I certainly grew up on these ideas. And the amount of information we have now about the impact on developing adolescents, we can't afford to keep those old terms around. We know that it impacts young people far differently than adults. We have brain development research, right, to show just how strikingly use in the teen years, inextricably is impacting the way teens are physically developing in their brain. We have addiction research to show us that the younger somebody starts using, the more likely it is that they'll have an addiction or dependency later in life. So we know that 90% of Americans who have an addiction disorder started their use before age 18. We know the connections with mental health for teens are huge, right? So we've seen crazy escalations in 911 calls, emergency room visits for kids younger than 18 years old because of cannabis use. We know the potency of modern drugs is just a far different landscape than what we saw in previous generations. And so there's both this urgency for immediate consequence and long-term safety risks where that rite of passage narrative no longer works, right? So just as an example, when I talk about potency, we'll talk about fentanyl certainly, but I want to use the example of cannabis. Really common, really normative, used throughout Marin. Remember, we're talking about teen use, not adult use, not your use. But one joint today is the equivalent of 12 joints from 1970. I realize joints aren't actually the preferred teen delivery method today, but if we just simply think about that difference, that one joint today has the potency of 12. Um, that's really substantial. The content of THC, the psychoactive part of cannabis, in contrast to CBD, has gone up to, on average 20%, and in some products up to 90%, right? And that's when we start to see kids showing up with psychosis episodes in emergency rooms. It is a different drug than the cannabis that a lot of us probably once knew. We know that in part due to that potency, we've seen daily use of cannabis skyrocket. So that middle chart, that red line where you can see whoop, steep increase, that's the increase in daily users between I think 2014 and 2020. And the highest rate of daily users are young adults, age 18 to 24. So what they're starting to do now in high school is what sets up chronic use and dependency in that 18 to 24-year-old range, okay? We know there's more daily cannabis users now than there are daily alcohol users in the US, and 20 million people have a cannabis use disorder. And that's really important because growing up, we were told you can't be addicted to marijuana, right? And that's no longer the case. It's, now officially an addiction disorder that folks are diagnosed with. There are withdrawal symptoms. There are measures that categorize it as an addiction. Okay. I think, most concerning to some of us is the impact on mental health. Again, the way that it impacts teens is different than adults. And we have a really recent, substantially sized study that came out recently that is sort of the final word that we've been waiting for to understand past year cannabis use linked with 2 times higher risk of bipolar, 34% higher risk of depression, and 24% higher risk of anxiety disorders by young adulthood. So when we talk about sort of urgency and potency and it being a different landscape, this is a really good example. The severity and consequences have skyrocketed. The perceptions of safety have not skyrocketed along with it, right? And that's where we get a little concerned. So here in Marin, Marin is really frequently cited as the healthiest county in California, one of the healthiest counties in the United States. And that's true across the board with a lot of measures, not with substance use. With substance use, we have dubious honor of having some of the very highest rates of teen use in California and even in the nation. So if we look at the data, which I want you to know does not include Branson students. Okay, so we'll talk about that in a second. This is public high schools in Marin County. We see that 11th graders' use of cannabis is 3 times that of this California state average. We see a third of 11th graders currently using at least one substance. At some high schools, and in particular, some of our high achieving public high schools, that rate's much higher. It's 47% or so for using one substance. And at one of our schools, even 20% for heavy use. Okay. So these are just our averages. We know that over a third of our teens are experiencing chronic sadness and hopelessness, which is one of our key measures for depression. And that jives actually with national trends. Some of you might have seen shortly after COVID, there was a really big CDC report on the escalation of teen mental health issues in the past decade. We see that across the board, across gender and race, but we see it more pronounced in our teen girls and in our LGBTQ kids. Okay, important to know. And across the board in Marin, we hear that it's really easy or fairly easy to access alcohol, cannabis, tobacco. That access is a real issue here. So, what's happening at Branson? We don't actually know in that we don't have the same kind of data that we have with public schools because those surveys aren't administered in the private schools. We can make some inferences, right? We can look at the Marin data. We can look at some of the high achieving public schools. We can look at national data and some of the characteristics that Branson might share with other schools and their rates, right? But we don't actually know. And what I'd like to do, if some folks are willing, is open this up for a moment to your perspectives. If you have any insight, if you have a kid who shares, if you have a sense from talking to other parents, I'd love to either invite you to just come off microphone. I can't see all of you, but you can come on off the microphone, or you're welcome if it's more comfortable to share in the chat. But I do want to be really transparent and say we're flying with inferences rather than actual school-based data in terms of what's happening. So if anyone has anything to share at all, Noelle, if you have anything to share about that you're comfortable with about what you hear, that would be great at this point. I think Noelle,
Yeah, I
yeah.
can start us off. So, right now for human development, I'm teaching the seniors, and we've kind of bookended it with some more drug and alcohol education, especially focused on bystander intervention. But before we jumped into the conversation, what I had the students do was kind of this live spectrum scale. So strongly agree on one side of the room, strongly disagree on the other side, and they have to put themselves in. And I read a bunch of statements where we could talk about this thing without asking them directly about their own habits. So questions like, I believe the drinking age should be 21 years old. And then you get a really interesting conversation when students say, I really believe it should be 18, and here's why. And then you get a little bit more of a view into the patterns that seem substantial. And what I would say is for our seniors, there's kind of different levels of use, and experimentation seems the norm. And then somewhat of a regular use based on a social scene seems like regular use for small but mighty minority group as well.
Small but mighty. Yeah, thank you. Which is what we see. Noelle, I appreciate that a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's I think the clearest view. Is there anybody else who wants to share anything they know or anything they've heard?
Oh, I figured out how to get on camera and get my mic to work.
Yes, yes,
Um,
Kimberly.
so I've asked my daughter like multiple times, like, do you know of anybody? Is anybody like getting into trouble? And she in her group, I mean, I'm happy to report that she never really hears about anything. Like maybe occasionally, like a friend of a friend might have like gotten like some alcohol or something, but I I actually think they're like pretty well-rounded kids that know the consequences. And maybe I'm being like overly positive, but when I was in school, like everybody was getting messed up all the time. It was just like what everybody did. And so I'm like kind of surprised at the lack of report. Or she's just not being honest with me. I don't know.
Right. And both are possible. It might be that in her group, that's not the norm. And what we do know certainly is not everybody's doing it. And not even the
Sure.
majority is doing it, right? And so
Yeah,
there have
which
to
is
be the kids
great.
that aren't. Yeah, it
Yeah.
is. It is. Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. So,
Oh, I'll also just as like a side note, because she grew up in San Francisco, and so we would walk past people that were under the influence, intoxicated, not able to stand up, and we'd have really open conversations about what that is. So a little
awesome.
fear doesn't hurt anything.
Awesome. And early and frequent communication doesn't hurt anything either. So that's awesome.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
totally.
yeah. Okay.
So we're gonna look into this though, this teen risk, right? And how we protect kids too. And we're gonna do two things. We're gonna talk about general teen risk. We're gonna talk about risk for high achieving kids. Um, and then later we'll look at parenting for prevention, sort of for all kids. But I really want to ground us first, sort of in that high achieving research. You might recognize your kids in that, and you might not, right? And so again, take what's really going to be valuable for you, leave what isn't. But first, I think a lot of you already know this, but it bears repeating. That teen brain is doing some wild stuff. So that parent who described parenting a teen as bewildering in the beginning, immediately when I saw that, I thought, ah, that teen brain, right? That's causing all sorts of havoc here. And the biggest thing to understand for substance use risk, but it helps us understand our kids generally, is they've got one set of skills that are really well developed and one set that really isn't. And the well developed skills are sort of like the gas and the underdeveloped ones is the brake. So the brake's not working as well as the gas is, right? So when I say that, what I'm talking about is like the amygdala, the reward centers. These are really developed part of the teen brains. They are operating in a world where they are very keenly responding to emotional cues, social cues, reward cues, right? So that crazy emotional response where you're like, where did that come from? That's the part of the brain that's working. It's coming from exactly the right spot. But what is still under construction is the part of their brains that control executive functioning and planning and impulse control and long-term thinking. And so, as a parent, when we're like, what were you thinking? They were doing their best, right? But they're not quite there yet. And part of our role as parents, especially when it comes to substances, when we're seeing risk and consequence, is to help them think through that because they're not entirely thinking through that. Okay. We also know that this is this wide open period of plasticity. This is why they're learning so much. It's so cool to see everything they can do and learn and take on. Um, the teen brain also learns substances, though much more effectively than the adult brain. It can become addicted more easily. It can learn social norms around substances more easily, right? So that's what's happening in their brains. And I try to remind myself of that when I get some of those moody responses. But our teens are up against a lot, and I think we need to really take a moment to understand and empathize with that. They are facing challenges we have all faced as teens, and then they're facing a whole host of new challenges. And so I'm hoping that in the chat, you can go ahead and put down what are you seeing as the challenges your kids are dealing with, whether they're challenges teens have always had to deal with, or whether it's something quite new that you didn't have to deal with as a teenager. Go ahead and use the chat for that. What are your teens having to deal with day to day in their lives? Yeah, that's the first thing I think of, social media influence. Um, and with us having much understanding on how to counteract that. Yep. So much pressure. So much pressure. When we at MHIP recently, talked to some teens about what did they want their parents to know, it was all about pressure, how much more pressure there is. Um, College obsession, and not just college obsession, but colleges are more competitive, right? I today I couldn't get into the college I went to. No way, right? They just keep getting more and more competitive. So a lot of pressure, college issues, social media influence. That's on top of all the normal stuff about being a teen and figuring out relationships and friendships, and identity, right? All the things you're supposed to do are now layered or exacerbated by things like social media. So we want to really, really understand our teens when we think about pressure and risk. So I mentioned risk and protection. We want to decrease risk, increase protection. There's a whole host of factors that could be risk factors or protective factors. I've only listed some of them here, but there's some of the most common. Some we can't do anything about, like genetics, right? Some kids are predisposed. Some kids with certain kinds of neurodiversity are at greater risk for certain reasons, right? But there's a whole host of social and peer related factors as well. Is my kid engaged in cool activities? A lot of yours are. There's social norms and parent use and peer use. Does my kid have access, right? Mental health, experiences of trauma. These are all risk factors or protective factors, right? And one of the things we see across Marin County, it's going to certainly be even more so present at some higher achieving schools, but we see it across the county, is achievement culture. And I do want to call that out. And so we'll talk a bit about what we know generally about sort of high achieving teens and how we can work with that. The first thing I want to say is high achieving kiddos have a lot of protective factors. There's so much going on, right? Structure to their time, awesome. High expectations are actually good when delivered with warmth, right? Um, when they become internally motivated. They have adult mentorship. The number of times at Branson after school that I have seen a student sitting on a bench quietly talking to a teacher is incredible, right? They're future and goal oriented. They have passions beyond the classroom. They have a peer group with shared values. These are all so wonderfully protective, right? And I want to acknowledge that before we look at some of the risks because it's true. When we do look at substance use risk, though, for high achieving teens, it's often through what I will call different risk pathways than the general population. So general population, rebellion, risk taking, I want to be like my peers, right? Like all sorts of risk pathways exist. There are some unique ones that can impact some of our higher achieving teens, and it can be harder to tell when they show up. So, for example, um, it is so easy for all of us, kids and adults alike, to confuse high achievement with well-being. And achievement and competency is not the same as emotional resilience, right? We can have externally very successful kiddos who internally are struggling. And the thing with these kiddos, as a group, maybe not as individuals, again, this is generalized, but they are very skilled at masking where it hurts. They are very invested in their this image. They're invested in not disappointing you as parents, right? And it can be really easy to miss warning signs. These are the kids who are totally okay until they're totally not okay. And we go, whoa, how did that happen? And how did I miss it? Because that ability to mask and still do very well in so many areas is part of their skill set. Their identity can become tied to performance. So that's different than I want to do well. I want to do well in school or I want to get into a college. That is my identity becomes those achievements, right? And that's where we enter territory where we're talking about self-worth tied to an outcome or a fear of failure. We're all afraid of failure, but a fear of failure becomes a fear of losing my belonging in my peer group or my family, or losing my sense of identity. And of course, perfectionism, which I'm sure several of us in the room are self-identified perfectionists, but that can operate in two ways. That can be really positive. That's healthy striving, or that can be really maladaptive. That's the difference between I want to do well and I must not fail at this or else, right? These kids also tend to have a very high attunement to adult messaging. So, really attuned to comparison, criticism, what am I being praised for and what am I not being praised for? And so, this substance use pathway really becomes about kids who are using substances to cope with pressure, numbing this chronic stress baseline that some of them have, or enhancing performance. Um, what can we do? What the heck do we do as parents in that case? Um, you can start right now if you don't already explicitly normalize imperfection and struggle. Talk about your imperfection and struggle at the dinner table. Talk about the stress of the day and how you dealt with it, right? Don't assume they know those things. Like, make that a part of dinner conversation. Normalize that it's okay in this family to mess up a little bit. Um, Make sure your kid knows what it is you value about their character, not their outcomes and achievements. Those are really different, right? Now, that doesn't mean we stop praising those achievements. They're pretty awesome, but their character. You're a really kind friend, right? You're a kind person. You're funny. Like, your self-worth beyond your achievements matters. Model failing forward. So what does it mean to fail and have that be a good thing? To learn lessons that you wouldn't have learned otherwise, right? Talk about it, model it in your own life. I'm sure we all have our own stories of failing forward. It's tricky, but we have to take a look at our own perfectionism, our own identity around achievement, and look at what are we consciously or subconsciously passing on to our kids. Practice curious communication instead of critical communication. Remember, teens are really sensitive to criticism, and teens from the high achieving set tend to be even more so. Um, Pay attention to what you're praising in your kiddos, right? Make sure it is all the wonderful things about them across the board. And please do get professional help for kids who you know are struggling because kids will find a way to cope. And if kids need to self-medicate, they will. And certainly we'd rather have them seeing somebody who can help them or a prescription for something that might help them instead of that self-medication. Another risk pathway we see is due to this high pressure, low recovery time. And gosh, if this doesn't happen to adults in this room, that's crazy. I see myself in this as well, which is that we have packed schedules, we have limited downtime, we have limited sleep. One of the responses to being a parent of a teen was busy, right? Busy was the word that came up. And this creates this chronic stress. It creates a dysregulation of important functions like decision making and mood and impulse control. And when we don't have that unstructured time anywhere or that downtime, we don't get to actually fully develop our own internal regulation structures, right? Um, we also know that with this group, it can lead to this mindset of work hard, play hard, right? So kids who are working really hard, doing exactly what they need to do, and when there is a moment or an event where they get to let the fuse go, they let it go, right? Um, and so we need to be aware that this is a pathway as well. I know this is corny to say prioritize sleep with a teenager because they go to bed late and they wake up early. Um, we all had bedtime rituals for our kids up to a certain age, right? There was a way we did bedtime, and maybe there were songs, maybe the light went out at a certain time. And then we all stopped the bedtime ritual, except it only became more and more important for our kids as they grew. And so consider what might a bedtime ritual, engage your kid in that conversation. What might that look like, right? Consider that downtime is scheduled time, right? It's not the leftover pieces. It's, hey, honey, I see you have a busy week. When's your recovery time, right? When is that happening? We can help create off ramps because what happens for a lot of kids is school, sports, tutoring, homework, bed, and then we do it all over again. And there is no off ramp and there's no letdown for the nervous system where kids can let their nervous systems know the day is over and they're okay. And sometimes creating a boundary, you have to choose what that boundary is for you. Some families are like, hey, actually, we love hearing about your day at school, but school talk actually stops at dinner time. Or, you know what? It's been a big day. We're not solving any major problems after a certain time. Like part of our bedtime ritual is we're telling our nervous systems and our bodies that the day is done and we can rest now. And we need to protect that for our kiddos. We have another risk pathway, of course, many, but the ones I want to call out are one around social norms. What can sometimes, not always happen, but sometimes happen with high achieving kiddos is that there are norms around use, but they're either quite discreet and quiet, so accepted but discreet, or again, this work hard, play hard dynamic, that that's the accepted social norm. We also have a lot more access and knowledge. So a lot of our kids, not all, but they do have more financial resources and social connections. And more than anything, they're resources that they're smart. They know how to get information. They know how to go online and look up microdosing for focus, right? And that smarts can create a false sense of control, which doesn't actually exist, right? So what do we do? Um, if you're not already talking with other parents, I encourage you to. It can feel like a stigmatizing issue, but it's so important that we keep talking to each other. If you're not already knowing what's on social media, some ways to find out. For example, one of the recent things that I think is important is that designated drivers are no longer the norm. There's been a bit of a change on that where there's a lot more pressure now to drink and drive. These are important things for us to know about. Monitor what we call rebound weekends. This is that work hard, play hard mentality. Um, if a bunch of big exams are over, if college admissions notifications just went out, right? These are these high pressure moments that then have the exhale after. That's a rebound weekend. And that's where I do want to know sort of what my kids' plans are and where they are and what's going on, because that's where that work hard, play hard pattern tends to show up. Okay. Um, and your kids are smart. And so engage them in thinking through those scenarios on safety and decision making ahead of time, and what they do know. There is a risk factor when these kiddos go to college. For all kiddos, but with this group who might be more accustomed to following rules, actually, in that first semester of college, we do see a spike in risk. There's sudden independence, there's less structure, there's all these stressors colliding at once. You're finding new friends and where you fit in. It's a lot. That is not to make anyone scared. There's plenty that you can do as a parent to set your kids up for success, but it's a spike that we should know about. Okay. And then as I close this section, I just encourage everyone to pause for a second and think about, what do you think your child believes that you value most about them? how do they know that? Like, have you been explicit? And where might they feel pressures that they're not talking about, right? And that's good for all kids, whether we're talking about substance use or not, right? That's good for us to check in. And what do I really value most about my kid? Do they know it? How do they know it? How can I be sure they know it? And are there some things going on with them that they might not be talking about? Um, Kids have a way of almost trying to protect their parents from seeing their struggle sometimes. And really good kids, particularly, are prone to that. And we don't want our kids to protect us. We're strong enough to protect them, but it can happen, right? Okay. All right, let me pause because I've been talking a lot. If anybody has any reactions or additions or comments, anything to add or ask, now is a great moment to either come off mute or put it in the chat, and we'll give it a minute before I continue for that. All right. I am of course talking too much and behind on my own timelines. So, but this is important stuff. We'll just go through it. I'll try not to go through it too fast. We know, especially for those of you, your kids are in ninth grade. They're, there really is a difference between ninth grade and 11th grade use. We see that increase. And there's a whole bunch of parenting for prevention tools, essentially, that are totally backed by research. These are the things that we know build protective factors, and we want you to know about them too. There's a whole bunch, but I'm going to describe it as three. That's the easiest way to remember it. Connect with your teen, guide your teen, and plan for safety with your teen, right? Doing these things is associated with all the good substance use outcomes: lower use, delayed use, less attendance at parties with use, less binge drinking, less drinking and driving, right? All of those outcomes because your relationship actually matters more than anything else. If you're somebody who's ever looked at parenting styles, we see that parents that have a very high level of warmth and support, but also a really high level of structure, that's where we consistently see positive outcomes for teens across outcomes, not just substance use, life outcomes. So that first one, connect. This is all about your relationship, right? This is about how our teens perceive our relationships, though. So that's important. It's teen perception, perception of our warmth and support, perception of our reliability. Do I feel like I am known and seen by my parent, right? These are all really, really important to with associations of lowered substance use. What's tricky here is that it's teen perceptions of, and there is a huge gap at this age because of teen development between what we as parents intend for our kids to hear and what they hear. Right? This gets tricky. Somebody used the word tricky when we talked about parenting teens. This is tricky. For young people who already are in a period of increased self-consciousness and rejection sensitivity, they're busy individuating, which means one moment their head's on my shoulder and the next moment they want nothing to do with me. How do I reliably connect and make sure they perceive that warmth and connection? One of them is to be the reliable and consistent figure. You do not waver based upon them, right? You are always there. You're the steady. But I would love to hear ways that parents in this room continue to connect with their teens. If you have something, a tradition that you do, or you know that when you're in the car, you can have conversations, whatever it is, when are the moments, or how do you continue to connect with your teenager? You can do that in the chat or you can come off mute because this is actually where we learn the most is from each other. How do you connect with your teen? Is it family dinners? Ah, thank you, Nika, sharing about my own mistakes. Yeah, I love that you do that. I love that you can be fallible in front of your kids. Yes, TV, watching TV with your kids. You may not like their show, but if you can learn to like it and be there with them, that we hear from teens is actually huge. Yep, interested in whatever your kids love. Group activities. Cool. Sports feature in your family, Nicholas. That's great. Yeah, find what they like, find their TV show, find their activity. And instead of being like, oh God, why do you watch that? It's so stupid, right? Join them, right? Because when you reject their TV show, you're rejecting them in their eyes, right? And when you join them, you're connecting with them. That's great. Thank you all. I appreciate that input. Okay, shopping. Yep, absolutely. Communication. We know this is huge. We know it needs to be early and often. We know it needs to be non-judgmental and curious rather than critical. Um, we know that we need to allow them to disclose hard stuff, and we need to hear that calmly if they ever will be honest with us again. And we need to not assume they know things. Not assume they know what we value about them, right? Not assume that they know they're going to be loved no matter what, no matter how they do on a test, no matter what their gender identity is. We make a lot of assumptions that, of course, they know this about me and my values, but we need to be explicit. They don't always. I love driving in the car with no destination because a lot sometimes about connecting with high achieving teens is connecting without an agenda without an agenda. And I think long drives with music on is something that is not an agenda. I think that's great. All right. Connect through monitoring. When I say monitoring, I do not mean spying. I do not mean surveillance, right? But there is a clear link between parents who know where their kids are, who they're with, and when they're there and coming home, and lower substance use risk. Obviously, there's age appropriate autonomy built in here, but we know monitoring is important and we know it's most effective when disclosures come from our young people voluntarily or easily, right? So it's knowing based upon our connection rather than my control over you. That makes sense. And that's why we have it here in the connect section. But it is important. We often stop monitoring a little too soon. Okay. The second prominent component is guide. Be that guide for your kiddos, right? You can provide clear expectations, you can provide role modeling, you can get your kids support. And we know that teens who think that their parents wouldn't want them to use are far less likely to use. 83% lower odds of tobacco use, 87% lower odds of cannabis, 66% lower odds of alcohol. That's huge, okay? When we set that expectation that this is our value and we talk to our kids about it, that actually makes a difference. Something to note about our high achieving kids, a lot of them do really well with rules, but either intentionally break the rules because of the work hard, play hard effect, or then struggle in the absence of them when they go to college. And so part of your job when they go to college is helping ease from a high structure to no parental structure, right? When we say guide, we're also talking about role modeling. And I want to be clear about what the research says. The research does not say that you as a parent cannot have a glass of wine with dinner. Does not say that. No one's saying that. What the research says is that parents who model frequent, heavy, or coping oriented use, and in this study, drinking, those teens are more likely to drink earlier, more, and have harms later, right? And so the ask of parents as role models is to be mindful simply of how and when, to be mindful of how you manage substances and your moderation and boundaries, to let your teens see you making real-time decisions. And I know it sounds goofy, but I've started to get into narrating my choices, right? So you can say something like, "Oh, I'm driving tonight. I'm actually going to have the sparkling water," or "I've got a big presentation tomorrow. I don't need a second drink, thank you," right? Again, that being explicit in our role modeling. And then I would say, work on identifying any gaps between what you tell your kids to do and what you do, because teens are so tuned into that gap between what you say and what you do. They will use it against us every time, they're very perceptive of that, and they're watching what we do more than listening to what we say. Um, And then our third component is planning for safety, which is really super important. So, some of you might have, you can give me a thumbs up if this sounds like you, if you grew up or even still have the idea, which is very pervasive in our culture, that kids are safer if they're using substances in my home under my supervision. They'll learn their limits before they go to college. If they're here, at least they won't be driving. This was fully my line of thinking until I took a look at the very conclusive research that this actually is not the case. And in fact, teens who are allowed to drink alcohol, in this case of this research under supervision at home, are far more likely to have harmful drinking behaviors later. And I love to hear that that was not something that everybody heard in their childhood. I certainly did. But we know there are substantial consequences. Here in Marin, we have social host ordinances, which actually hold you responsible for any partying in your home, which is two or more minors. Meaning any use in your home, meaning if a kid gets in a car and drives, leaving your home and has been using, that you're liable for that as well. And it's really especially important in terms of access in our homes that kids that are not our own are staying safe because even kids who we've had play dates with since elementary school, we don't know their genetics. We don't know their mental health history. We don't know what prescriptions they're taking, right? And we don't know how dangerous any sort of use in our homes might be. So in terms of planning for safety, it is an issue in Marin. Um, Parent, I guess, permissiveness or knowing or even hosting of events with substances. Again, no judgment if that's something in this space. But I just want everybody to know that the research is really conclusive on some of the harms that can be done um, because of that. Okay. So have a safety plan. And I would love to hear from folks in this room if you have any form of safety plan with your kids. Some parents and kids have like a code word for a pickup or just an agreement that if you ever need me, you call me and I'll be there. Some folks have an emergency Uber account. Some of you have probably just talked a lot with your kids about some of the greatest risks, like mixing drugs. But we do know that teens respond better to your expectations of no use when you are also acknowledging that reality happens and supporting them in making a safety plan, right? Is there anyone out here who has any sort of safety plan with their kiddos at all, or any sort of agreement like, I'll come get you, no yelling, I swear, or anything like that? And if not, and you don't because you think your kids aren't using, thank you, Ann Rose. Yep, pick up, absolutely. Even for our kids who aren't using, even if we're sure of it, we need to make this plan because there might be a first time and they need to know that you are a safety plan for them as well, right? You are the safe plan. I think I said that, but never goes.
I'll
That's great.
just pop in
Yeah,
here with
absolutely.
one thing.
Please, Noelle.
Um, Great news is that it's more of an emotional safety plan, but in the human development curriculum, by sophomore year, we have your students all pull out their phone and create a little step-by-step safety plan. And a few of the things on there are who's a safe adult on campus at Branson, and then who's a safe adult outside of Branson. Um, where can I go physically on campus, and where can I go physically off campus that where I feel safe? And what's one thing I can do to calm my nervous system? So they all have made that, even if you haven't made that with them.
That's awesome. And I will say I've continued to be impressed with the human development curriculum at Branson. And I've seen a lot. So I love that. And this is the kind of things that teens need to think through ahead of time, guided by adults. Remember, because that part of their brain that does the planning and the risk and consequence evaluations isn't fully developed, right? So we need to walk them through that. So cool. I agree, Kimberly. So cool. I think that's great. I think that's great. So some of you might be starting to think about college or have seniors. I think we might have had a couple in the room. planning for safety becomes really critical. You're not there for the pickup necessarily anymore, right? And what we talk about certainly becomes more important in terms of blood alcohol content, party safety, never being left alone, never leaving a friend alone, no random pills, right? I could go on and on. I do want to mention it is sort of well documented in the data that certain college environments are more risky than others. So party schools, right? The Greek system, far more 911 calls and use and accidents and injuries. Does that mean that your kids shouldn't go to the sorority that you went to? No, that's not what we're saying at all. But I always want my kids to know when they're going into a situation that is inherently risky. That this isn't just about your individual decision making. You are in a tough fishbowl. And because of that, we need to think through how you're going to stay safe in a fishbowl that's working against you, right? And so if you do have kids who are really interested, there's a lot of cool things about that system, but we need to be having those conversations to help prepare them to hold their own with a great amount of normative pressure in those situations and prepare them to be good friends to other people who might get in trouble as well. A quick reframe for folks whose kids are heading to college. I said connect, guide, plan for safety. In college, this changes a little bit. Guide becomes coach. You can still do a lot of the same things. Your relationship and connection is still super important. And in fact, if your high school has drifted from you, your college kid in strange ways might start to come back to you. You can still have open communication. You are still a role model. You even still get to have expectations and boundaries, right? But what changes is you're there for advice and encouragement and support. You're there to ask curious questions. You can support them to find engagement in activities that are going to get them into cool things. You can support them to build protective relationships with adult mentors or cool peer networks, but you're not on the ground. You're not doing it. We do have to let go, right? Um, we can prepare them for safety planning though, and we can prepare them to know that it's okay that if in their first year or their first semester they feel a little crazy. That yes, college is awesome, but you might also experience, right, some challenging feelings. You might experience that it's a little strange when you're managing all of your own time. And I'm a thought partner for you in that, and I'm here for you in that, and help ease that transition as their coach. All right, you guys are awesome. Thanks for hanging with me. I do want to talk about fentanyl and emergency response. I do want to tell you that all the work we've done at Branson with Branson teachers this year has been funded by opioid settlement funds. That's lawsuits against Big Pharma for their role in the opioid crisis. Um, and I do want every parent here, even if your kid is not, they don't use, I need you to know about fentanyl because the kids who are dying of overdoses are not kids who are addicted to drugs, right? They're kids who make a mistake. They're a kid who one time take a pill or look for something they think is an Adderall, and they don't know what they're taking. And the Marin kids that we have lost to overdoses in recent years have been really awesome kids who have gone away to college or elsewhere and have overdosed away from home. Okay, so that's not to scare us because our kids are going to be awesome and fine because they're going to be prepared with this information, but it's important. So, we know that most overdoses do include fentanyl now, and most teens don't know that they're taking it. Okay. It's a really powerful synthetic opioid. It is 100 times stronger than morphine and 50 times stronger than heroin. Super tiny amounts can be fatal, right? 10 to 15 grains of table salt worth. I'm 5 feet tall, probably 8 grains of table salt could take me out, right? And we know that they're pressed into fake pills in high amounts. So 6 out of every 10, seized tested positive for fatal doses. They're marketed as legit pills. So Adderall, Xanax, a Percocet, a kid who's having back pain and took a Percocet once by prescription and goes, oh gosh, that will help again, and looks to online sources to get that Percocet could in fact be purchasing they are purchasing a fake pill, but it could be one that has fentanyl in it. They're entirely indistinguishable from prescription pills. They're widely available, and the way it works is they're sort of in unpredictable places in any given batch of drugs and in unpredictable places in the pill itself. Call it the chocolate chip cookie effect. It makes it really hard to detect. We know that when someone's having an overdose, they show some really classic symptoms. Their breathing is going to go really slow or stopped, and they're not going to be responsive. If you have a 12th grader, they recently learned about the sternum test, like being hit on the sternum to see if somebody wakes up. They might make a gurgling or choking sound, and then pinpoint pupils or blue or gray lips are a really, really classic sign. The way we respond to this is with naloxone, and I would love all of your households to have naloxone in them, and I will tell you where you can get it for free. Naloxone looks like this. You hold your hand up top and your thumb goes on that plunger. Um, if you were to give this to yourself right now, it might be a little uncomfortable, but there would be no negative effect whatsoever. So we know it's extremely effective in bringing somebody back from an overdose, and I can't hurt somebody who's not having an overdose with it. There's no harm in giving it. You don't have to try to figure out actually, is someone having an opioid overdose or are they passed out drunk? You call 911, right? And then if you suspect in any way an opioid overdose, you give naloxone, which also is known as Narcan. So the way this works is the nozzle is inserted into one nostril. You press that plunger and you wait a few minutes. Um, if the person comes to, great, you stay with them until help arrives. And if after 3 minutes they haven't come to, there's usually a second dose in the box, and you do that in the other nostril. If you know how to do rescue breathing and you're comfortable doing rescue breathing, you can do that between the doses too. Okay. Remember, you're not going to hurt somebody with this. If somebody does come to, you will have just very quickly taken them uh, out of a drug-induced state and very quickly put them into withdrawal, and they will not be happy with you. So that's okay. We just take a step back and we wait for 911 to arrive or put them in a rescue position. This is a temporary reversal of an overdose. We need to have 911 come and take somebody back because this is only going to last for like 45 minutes to an hour. And then the overdose can essentially take over again. Okay. So what I want is really, really very much is for you all to check in with your kids as soon as feels comfortable and appropriate the next time you're driving in the car today. What do you know about fentanyl, right? What do you know about naloxone? The message that needs to be delivered early and often is just no random pills, right? If our doctor did not give this to you, no random pills. We hear sometimes about pill parties where kids will bring different pills and you just kind of grab one. This is not there is no room for experimentation with random pills anymore, and I want our kids to know that. I also want them all and to know where to get naloxone for free. You can use this QR code with your phone right now, or you can go to the odfreemarin.org site. There are vending machines and almost like like the little free library boxes. There's like little free library boxes full of naloxone throughout Marin, um, which is important. And then if your kid is leaving Marin, if they're going away to college, get online with them, help them think through this, right? What are the local resources for naloxone? Where can they get it on campus? Right? Start to research other resources for health and wellness. Make sure they know where they're going to be able to go. Um, Parents are asked so much, schools are asked so much, but you have some of the most powerful tools. Really, that connection you have with your kid is the strongest. Them knowing they are loved and valued regardless of achievement is probably for a lot of you the best thing you can do for them. And setting them up to think through what safety looks like. Okay. Good news, you've already heard a little bit tonight, but you're not alone in doing this. this you have Marin Healthy Youth Partnerships. We're a resource. Please hop into our website anytime you'd like to check that out and things we have to offer. And then you have the school and the amazing resources there. So I'm going to pass this over to Noelle to tell you about what kind of education, we've heard a little bit, what kind of education your kids are getting at Branson.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jackie. It's been so great to collaborate with you just this semester. We're excited about future partnership. So I'll just kind of briefly review the human development curriculum. Uh, each year, your student takes one semester of human development, and it meets just as often as any other class for that semester. So those regular meeting times really help us because we know that when we deliver information in a one-off special assembly or a one-off advisory conversation, it doesn't tend to stick as well as consistent delivery. So our ninth grade course is called Developing Minds. And that's our course really focused on personal identity in the teen brain. And that's where we first talk about kind of drug and alcohol education 101. So they learn about different drug and alcohol classifications and effects like suppressants, depressants, uppers, downers, all arounders, that kind of thing, short and long-term effects, effects on the brain, decision making and impulse control, and then also kind of levels of use. So experimentation, tolerance, dependence, addiction. Another interesting way to chat with your kid about this is say, "Hey, I heard from your HD teacher you've learned about the levels of use. Tell me what you know about that." And they know a lot, and it's pretty cool to hear them explain it back to you. Um, and we'll get into some case scenario work as well, freshman year, and kind of introduce them to concepts around making what we call value aligned decisions. So decisions that feel good for me. So kind of introducing the peer pressure conversation. 10th grade is our comprehensive sex education course. And the main way that we talk about drugs and alcohol in that course is through talking about what drug facilitated sexual assault is, and also talking about the way alcohol and peer pressure affect our ability to set boundaries, respect boundaries, and kind of consent. Then junior year is where they're taking a course called Scholarship and Leadership. Towards the end, we kind of revisit all the concepts they learned about freshman year, um, see what they remember, and then re-engage at a higher level. So a lot of the scenario work will become a bit more realistic probably for a lot of them, and they're going to learn a bit more about intervention tactics. And then senior year, this is the first year we've had the senior human development course, and it's all about life skills beyond Branson. So this is where the material becomes the most hands-on, and it's all workshop based. So all scenario based, case scenarios that they have to present back. This is what we would do. Real case scenarios that have happened on different college campuses. They even take a self-defense course. So self-defense, assertiveness training. So that's kind of the personal safety. And then we do a big focus on bystander intervention, how to look out for others. And that's really centered around drug and alcohol use. We had a great lecture actually on sports betting. So kind of different patterns of addiction, as well as healthy romantic relationships. So that is the super quick, high level overview. We also have education and touch points happening with our counseling team, our deans, our student support team, and our advisors. And any questions, you can email me always. But if you have any questions right here, I'm happy to take them.
Awesome. In the comments, we got to thank you for everything and for supporting our kids at Branson. So grateful. I agree. And I want to add to everything that Noelle said. And if there are questions, please, you can come off mic or do it in the chat. This year, with some of our opioid funding, we've been able to supplement, like to help with the 12th grade and safety planning. And so, what you learned tonight about fentanyl and overdose, if you have a 12th grader, they should know that, right? They should know that absolutely. And I think your ninth graders also learn a fair amount about opioids and fentanyl as well. I also wish I had all of this when I was a kid. That's so true. It's been pretty special to see what happens in the human development department. So we're going to have time for Q&A, whether that's questions for Noelle or for me, or simply comments or questions or discussion for each other as parents. But before I do, I, I nobody likes surveys. I know nobody likes surveys. I'm going to ask you when we're done to take a few minutes and fill out a survey. We'll also put the link in the chat. You'll notice that it's heavily slanted towards the opioid information because that's our funding. But in the open question at the end, that's where I really want to know what was helpful for tonight. What would you have liked to get that maybe you didn't get? Um, what will you take away, right? But if you could fill out this survey for us, we'd be really appreciative. So Amanda will make sure that the link to that is also in our chat. And I absolutely want to open this up. Sometimes there's questions, sometimes they're not. But if you either want to come off mute or just, you know what? I'm going to stop sharing my screen. If you want to come off mute or put something in the chat, if you have any questions, you are more than invited to, my friends. Thanks, Amanda. You're welcome for the info and insights. Can I ask, I don't want to ask about kids' use at all, but were you able to recognize in some of the information on high achieving teens what you see in peer groups at Branson? Nicole or Noelle, sorry, was some of that familiar to you for what you see in students? Is there something different happening at Branson that would be cool to know about? What's your sense, everyone? Noelle.
Yeah, I think the work hard, play hard mentality is something the kids will name. And it's something, it's almost a little bit can be like a badge of honor that we succeed in everything. Sports, athletics, the play, the dance show, getting into great colleges. There's the pressure and performance piece. And we can do all that and party. And I don't know how much of that is talk and how much of that is reality. Either way, it's normalizing that kind of behavior. And it's something that kids talk about. I've noticed with the 12th grade in what kind of college are you going to? Oh, sick. I heard that's a party school. Oh, it's a work hard, play hard environment. Um, so that language resonates for the kids.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for that insight. And I like, that's something we could do as parents is think about what play hard can mean. Not necessarily in regard to substances, right? Because that can mean all sorts of things outside of that context too. And if we can help our kids develop some of those play hard passions or that downtime where that diffusing doesn't feel quite as intense and oh God, I deserve this, right? That can be impactful too. Okay, we have a question. What's going on with gender relations at Branson? It appears to me that there's much less interaction, dating, etc. than I was young. I assume there are interesting pressures that the kids are dealing with that. And somebody else said, I also see that. So, Noelle, I don't know if that's something you can speak to or not. Does there seem to be to you sort of less dating or is it more not as committed dating, which we see sometimes in
Yeah.
college? Is that what it is? Okay, speak to
So I
that.
actually read a study on this recently, and I presented it to the students in HD and asked them what they thought. Gen Z, and now of course we're getting into Gen Alpha, does date less, dates significantly less than baby boomers and Gen X. So those are their parents. And some of that is because it's different terms. What, my parents would have called dating, they call hooking up.
Yeah.
And some of that may be actually really positive that students have better consent and boundary education and say no when they mean no. And then some of it is that there is more, I hate this term, but it's often called like a failure to launch effect, which just means that young people today are doing milestones later. So they are having their first sexual experiences later, they're having their first drug and alcohol experiences later, they're getting their first job later, things like that. And some of that's a post-COVID artifact as well. I'll say at Branson, we have a gender divide. Again, some of my colleagues who've been at Branson longer than me think part of it is a post-COVID artifact. Part of it is kind of very different messaging these days to young boys, especially on social media. Um, that makes it even harder for boys and girls to connect. And then something I've heard a lot from students is that boys and girls at Branson do hang out outside of school. It's much more
But not on
normal,
campus.
but not on campus. Um, and on campus, I think because we're a small school and everyone likes to know what everyone's doing, there can be kind of a toxic surveillance culture. A boy,
Mm.
even the freshmen, there was, at least in the fall, there was a Snapchat group called Caught Rizzing. Like, we are going to catch you flirting. And if a boy and a girl, we're chatting, so also the heteronormative lens is here, the whole grade sees it. So I think also normalizing platonic friendships across genders, and also as much as, I mean, I'm a romantic, I love to know who's dating who, but as much as we can decrease kind of this gossip culture can get
No,
toxic.
well, that just got sort of validated by a parent who is a Branson alum in the chat as well, that because it's small, everything you do is going to be known, and so keeping it low key becomes important. We've
Yeah.
also seen,
Noel,
go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Could you just expand a little bit on the comment about like the things that like boys might have been like that they might have like heard or been like sensitized to or something like there was something
The
more in
social
there.
media, the
Yeah,
social
and
media
that
comment, Adam. Yeah.
yeah, and that like you see that like affecting behavior.
Yeah, and this is new as of kind of this year, for me at least. This is the first year where it's really come to my plate. Like terms like manosphere, I hadn't heard before really. Um, but some of it is kind of really radical YouTubers mostly. And a lot of this is stuff that, these aren't the YouTube rabbit holes I get stuck on. So I hear it from them on really rigid gender roles, mostly
They're
returning
back.
back to
Yeah.
really rigid gender roles. And that's something that, and again, I don't know how pervasive it is. It's enough that it's come up in a few of my
It's
classes.
a real thing. Yeah,
Yeah, it's a real
it's a real thing.
it's come up, yeah, Noel, for us
And
as well. To the extent that, I mean, obviously I'm concerned about where the confluence with substance use, but like drinking and driving, that sort of manosphere got all excited about the recent Tiger Woods crash.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
That, right, like drinking and driving and surviving, how manly.
Mhm.
Yeah, so it is real. And when we talk about like monitoring for like substance use with our kids, we're parents. We get to monitor online activity too. We get to have these conversations about what they're seeing and doing online too. It is such a significant normative factor in their lives that we never see what messages they're getting unless we're really in it with them.
And again, a lot of schools are still doing gender binary human development, personal development classes. So it's a really great thing that Branson, we're a co-ed school and this class is co-ed just like the rest of yours, and you're going to be introduced to new perspectives. And I should have mentioned we also have, a safe space and open space, and a lot of our civil discourse norms also take place in the human development classroom. And with that, we have empathy building and cross-cultural communication, all those good
Thank
things.
you. Thank you. Well, anything else that anyone wants to surface? Um, I will say as, interests come up or questions about social media, we'll be continuing to work with Branson for the next couple years. We'll be offering a couple more workshops, not only to Branson, but to some of the other private schools. If there are topics that you're like, gosh, I really need to understand the influence of social media more, for example, then that's really important for us to know. Put that on your survey. Noelle, I don't know if you saw the comment, but Pepper really loves being in your
I love Pepper.
I think that's right. Yeah, thank you for being here. Um, yeah, I really want to thank you all for being here and being a part of it. Sort of aligning yourselves and what you know with what your kids are going through. That already is connection. Like your kids might roll your eyes when you tell them that you came tonight, but that is a clear, I care about you. I support you, right? That's a clear way of connecting and they do feel that underneath the eye roll. They do. Um, so if anyone has any other questions, I invite you to stay. Otherwise, I've put that link to the survey in the chat once more, and I want to appreciate and thank you all. You can stay. You can leave for the evening. Kimberly, hi. Did you want to share with us or ask a question? Oh, you're on mute, but I know you know how to come off mute because you've done it before. Maybe. You could also put it in the chat. See if I can unmute you.
Ah, I figured it out. I'm on my phone, so it's kind of weird. Just wanted to wave goodbye and say thank you. That's all.
Thank
Oh,
you
thank
so
you.
much, Kimberly.
Yeah, of
Thank you.
course.
Thank
You
you. A
guys have a
special
good
and a
night.
shout out to Noelle for being here with us as well for that school perspective that we can't otherwise get. Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you
definitely.
for having me.
Thanks, Kim.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you all. Have a good evening. You have amazing children.